If you don't like problems, this is not a career to get into.
What does it look like to produce a Netflix documentary or a Hulu documentary?
When you're given the budget for a documentary, you're going to go in with your best intentions, and then you're going to have things that change. It's called Unknown Number, the High School Catfish. You're working with real people. These are real people's stories that you're telling. If the cast member suddenly dropped out, like that could ruin your entire project. Festivals show a ton of movies, and only some are going to get good distribution deals. There is an art to getting things to the right place.
This is Produced With, honest conversations about how great work gets made and the cost of doing it right. And before we get started, we're really into the analytics and we notice a lot of you are watching but aren't subscribed. Please consider subscribe so that you can actually keep up with the show. Hey Ross, welcome to the pod. It's so good to have you.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
It's been a while since we last chatted, and some context that I think that would be fun for the audience. I was your intern maybe like a decade ago. It was my first feature film that I've ever worked on. And so it's like really cool to kind of be able to talk to you today. It's been so cool to kind of see your journey through, where we first started on California Solo to where you are now. Tell us what you're doing now, and would love to kind of walk through like how you got there.
I'm currently Chief Operating Officer of Campfire Studios. We're a film and TV production company here in Los Angeles, and we create primarily documentaries, but also scripted films and series as well. We're working in series format, feature format. We do podcasts as well, and we're really character driven in our storytelling. I started here in 2017, so I've been here almost 8 years, which is amazing. And I've been through a lot of growth with the company. We started with just about 4 of us, and we're about 25 at the moment on staff, plus tons of amazing freelancers that we work with. So very grateful to have been here for the growth of the company, and we're continuing to evolve every day. As we navigate the industry and expand on our projects. So it's been really exciting to be here and help run this company. I started my career in Los Angeles in 2008. I finished school here. I went to Emerson College, and my first experience out here was being an intern at a company called Partisan. Incredible company. Films, music videos, commercials. It was a really just incredibly creative environment as an intern to be around. So, and a lot of on-set experience. So the first week that I came to LA and walked in the doors, I was put on set working as a intern PA for a big Adidas commercial. And it was just amazing being on like the Warner Brothers ranch and seeing professionals working after I studied it in college and seeing what those similarities and differences are, but really just started networking from there and got a lot of experience as an intern. And hopefully you can relate from your intern experience, getting a lot of experience, a lot of connections, meeting a lot of people. And through that is really how I got my way into the industry. It's really from starting as an intern, meeting people that could help me, that I could connect with and work for. And right after I graduated college, I had reached back out to Partisan, and amazing person there at the time, Becca Kinski, who's an incredible producer of her own right now. She hooked me up with a producer that needed a PA on a music video that actually David Gelb directed, who went on to do movies like Origins of Sushi, and he created Chef's Table on Netflix and a lot of other amazing things. So that was my first job after college, was working on this music video with him that he was directing, and getting experience just running a project. It was just me and this producer, and I think we had like 20 grand to work with, and we put together a really impressive music video. And I kind of found my tribe through that of who I ended up working with for the next couple of years, and just built a community of crew, directors, editors, worked on a lot of different music videos and commercials in that early period. And things kind of progressed from there. So I actually ended up meeting you on a movie called California Solo that we shot in 2011. And that was through getting to know Minette Louie, who is the producer. And she was looking for someone in LA to help her navigate production in LA because she was based in New York. And my friend and roommate, Sal, had PA'd on her film that she shot called Children of Invention, which premiered at Sundance. And they stayed in touch. She sent out a big blast looking for people in Los Angeles to work on the production. And we ended up meeting when I was in New York, producing a music video for The Strokes. And we just kind of hit it off. I came back to LA, met the director, and got brought on as a co-producer. And it was an incredible experience because I had only worked on one other feature film at that time as a VPM. And this was more of a producing role. So I was kind of involved in all aspects of making the film. And
Cool.
yeah, it was an amazing experience. But that's how I ended up meeting you, because you came on as an intern. And I remember you shot a lot of EBK materials because you had a red, and you were kind of exploring filmmaking for yourself. And it was kind of a cool opportunity to bring you in and obviously help in many different ways on the film, but also getting to use your camera and shooting things on the set.
That particular moment, I actually thought I was going to DP like in life. Like that's what I wasn't really expecting to like take a producing turn, but it was moments like being able to be in the production office with you guys, kind of getting a taste for production, not only just cinematography, that's kind of shaped and like created a new path for me in terms of producing. So it's fun to reflect back on those days, because it's like, man, you ever think like, you know, if you haven't met a person or been on a certain set, like could the dominoes have fell the way that they have?
100%. And I always tell interns that I meet with today that like, it's really about building that network, because it's really easy to look back and see how all those things connected, but you can't really predict forward and say, oh, if I just talk to this person, if I just do this thing, you don't really know what's going to lead to what. And so I'm always about just having a strong work ethic, being good to people, treating others well, and working hard is just important, because if you are dedicated and you put a lot of effort in, and are kind to people, you'll build good connections, and things will start just unfolding from there that you don't expect. And that's definitely how my career started and continues to grow, is really just, building those connections. People lean on each other. You meet other producers. We're all kind of like this hive mind helping each other. And that's one of the things I love about being a producer too in this community is, being able to help each other. You can call me up and ask me for something maybe I experienced. I can ask you about something you experienced. We can all help each other move projects forward. And it's really collaborative in that way. But I definitely share that with you on sort of like the crew side, moving into producing. Because I actually, I was a crew member primarily in college. And so I was studying studio TV, like news, like live news broadcasts. I was a floor director, camera operator, audio mixer, technical directing, all those sort of crew positions in the studio. And I really loved the fast paced energy of it. I loved the technology of it. And I also did editing. So I did a lot of editing work in college. And I thought for a while, maybe editing is where I want to be, because I loved being on the computer and building story. And I especially loved getting into like visual effects, like messing with After Effects and doing animation and things like that. But once I got a taste of producing, I realized it was really the best match for my skill set. And I just kind of fell into it and really enjoyed it. I liked kind of being, and I still like being part of, what is driving a project forward and bringing all the pieces together. You get to have your hands in a little bit of everything, and, really feel like you're a part of shepherding something into creation. But similar to you, like kind of started more on that crew side and ended up realizing producing was what felt most natural to me.
I didn't realize like how similar our stories were until we started talking about it, where obviously like starting from the ground up, from interning, PAing, managing all that stuff. And as well as even the entry point being commercials and music videos, for many people, it could be very different. But I found my experience in that like really gave me like the grit of production in a way that like maybe you wouldn't just have by doing your own projects or you just kind of being immersed with like different types of productions, from like short form, low budget, to like, just various like types of projects. Do you feel like, Do you feel like that shaped the type of work that you're doing now? Like, how does one go from like music videos to like, feature length or TV series kind of stuff? Do you feel like that background helped, or was that just like your specific experience?
Yeah, no, the background definitely helped. I think, studying film in college certainly was helpful. I think that really gave me a network more than anything. Obviously, I was working on student films and productions and learning how to do various crew positions. That kind of gave me like a foundation for when I came out into the professional space, how I could, move into that area. So I think that was like a helpful foundation. Certainly not necessary. I know many amazing filmmakers and producers that did not go to film school. So I don't think you need to do that. But I think it was really helpful when I was starting out to have that foundation. And then when I moved into the professional realm and got experience in commercial music videos, I think it was so crucial to my education at the time, because I was able to do so much in such a short period of time. You could spend years making a feature film, and in that same time, I worked on dozens of projects. And so I think getting to work with different filmmakers, different crew members, different artists across all the spaces, production designers, DPs. I met a lot of people through doing short form projects, because there's just so much more happening over that span of time. So I think it was really great to learn from others and meet other people, kind of build that network. And then I think when I moved into the long form space, it also helped me, because whatever product I was working on, I would have those resources, have those connections, those crew to call upon, but also maybe I had experienced a stunt on something I did, or a motion graphics or visual effects on a commercial level. And then when I was exploring that on a feature level, I had some of that foundational experience. I think it was like a really good educational time for me. But also, I just got to make so many cool things, and it was really fun. It's like I do sometimes miss, the grass is always greener. It's like when you're in commercial music videos, people are always like, oh, I just want to do long form. And then people are long form. They're like, I'd love to do a commercial or a music video. So I think, there's always a little bit of that going on. But I do sometimes miss the sort of fast paced nature of getting a short project made. It definitely comes together so quickly, especially in the music video space. And I think it's also really cool because it's kind of a bit of a playground, especially music videos, very much a playground creatively. So I feel like there's so much that directors can do and explore creatively, and therefore, cinematographers, production design, all the different aspects of filmmaking. So it's a really fun, creative endeavor working in the short form space too. So anyway, yeah, I definitely think that gave me a good foundation. I think for how I moved into long form, it was really through the network. It was really through building connections and meeting people, and always telling people, hey, this is what I'm interested in, right? This is my passion. And I always tell people that too, like, make sure even though you're doing something else, if there's something you're really passionate about, mention it to people, because you never know when someone's going to have an opportunity and say, oh, I remember Ross said that he really wanted to do X, Y, and Z. Maybe I'll call him into this thing. So, my first feature experience was a movie called Answer This. We shot in Michigan, Ann Arbor, beautiful city, college town. And I got that opportunity because I had been a production manager on a Funny or Die short. This is kind of like the up and coming days of Funny or Die, which was an incredible time, especially for us young people working on things, because there was just so much opportunity, lots of celebrities, really exciting projects, really funny, just for the spirit of doing something fun. And so it was really cool doing that. So I worked on a short, and Ace Norton directed it, who was a director at Partisan. So that's kind of how I got recommended for it, because I knew Ace. And the producer of that, Dave Bernard, who's gone on to do amazing things like White Lotus, he brought me in. I was the production manager of this short for Funny or Die. It's really fun. And later that year, Mike Farah, who I think at the time was the president of production, later became the CEO. He was looking for, he and his producing partner, Anna Wenger, were looking for a production manager. So I got recommended to it. It was low budget, kind of everyone wearing multiple hats type of film. And most of our support staff were, interns or recent college graduates. And then a lot of people from the Funny or Die group kind of came in. So people that had done makeup, production design, our cinematographer did a lot of Funny or Die work. And so it's like this incredible, creative, young energy out in Michigan, all living in frat houses during production. And it was an amazing experience. And I definitely learned a lot. Like I had my film textbook from class with me, which was like film production management 101. And I'd be like, I'm still learning, but I'm out here doing this movie. So I'm just going to like have my book with me. And it was incredible to just be able to be trusted to have that experience. And I think, again, it's like, that's where I say like having a strong work ethic, because people knew like I would figure it out. I would put the effort in, I would make it happen. I've always been a very reliable person. And we made the movie. It was really fun, came out great. But that was really kind of how that was like my first feature experience. So then when I got the opportunity with Minette on California Solo, you know, I'd had that other feature experience, had made a movie, and I had a lot of experience in, you know, in music videos and commercial space as well. And so I was able to, you know, utilize those skills and what I had learned to move that into, you know, making California Solo, but always learning. And I think that's like the biggest thing too, is like, no one knows everything. Even if the people working on the biggest projects, they're still figuring it out. They're still learning. There's always more to learn and know. And I think that's another thing I love about producing. But, you know, you have to hire people around you that have the experience you need. You know, if you haven't done stunts before, like you're going to need to bring in that great stunt coordinator that's going to advise you on how to do it. And then you're going to learn, okay, next time I know I'm going to have to prepare X, Y, and Z. So to answer your original question, I feel like my wealth of experience in short form definitely helped when I started into these long form projects. It's certainly different, like how you schedule, how you budget. A lot of what you're doing is different in the long form space, but I think the foundational experience definitely was a big help. And then people taking chances on me was vital to my experience and to being able to try new things.
Yeah, it's so true. Like I think about that a lot, even in my own career, about obviously we've touched on this, where it's about your network. It's about like, you know, the connections you make, but then also like who knows you? Because sometimes when they're thinking about it, it almost matters less that you know them. It matters more that they know you, because it's like when they're thinking about this position or thinking about this job or thinking about this, you know, role, that you pop up in like maybe the top 3 people like in their mind. And, you know, when they're reaching out for availability, that hopefully that coincides there.
Absolutely.
And foundationally, it sounds like what I'm synthesizing of what you're saying is like that currency is trust. Like you found, you know, that director at Partisan trusted you enough to recommend you on, you know, X project or Y project and so on. And it seems like that's kind of like what we sit on, is like a lot of relational equity, and trust is the currency there to that you're like managing. And sometimes it all falls on you, or sometimes like you get the praise for it as well. Do you find that is a lot of like what makes like a producer successful, or like how do you define that? Like, I know that's only a part of it.
No, definitely. I mean, it's definitely a part of it for sure. I mean, you know, I think having that, you know, producer is only really as strong as their network and their team and the people that they can bring, the resources they can bring together for a project, right? And that's a lot of what producing is bringing together the elements, the people, the creative, the financing, all the pieces together to make something happen. And to be able to do that, you know, it's hard to do that if you don't have anywhere to start, you know. So I think that's why I always tell people starting out, you know, get that experience, get on those sets, meet people, you know, still be making your own stuff, of course. But I think, you know, I think building your network is a big part of it. But it's not to say that just because you don't know someone doesn't mean something's not going to happen. We're often on projects looking for the best person for the job, and that may be someone that I've worked with before, and maybe someone completely new. And so it's really like figuring out what is needed to make the show succeed. Whatever your project is, you're casting, you know, it's almost like you're casting a film when you're putting a crew together. You know, you want your actors to have chemistry. You want your crew to have chemistry too. So you're wanting to find like the best people to like go into this thing with and push this boulder up a hill to get to the top and make it.
It's so true. Like even something else you said that really resonates is maybe that's even a part of a picture of like the overall thing that producers are responsible, which is at its core problem solving. And so that's one way to problem solve, right? Like is through a network. But like you're saying, like no two films are the same, no two music videos are the same. Every like project, you're almost having to like figure it out. Yes, there's probably some core principles that are true around everything, but it may take a different stunt or a different, location or scene, and variables change all the time. Like, how do you like account for stuff like that? Like, do you just have it like just so in the back of your head that like you trust yourself with the problem solving aspect of it, that you'll figure it out like throughout the way? Like, how do you think about that as like a producer? And maybe now as a part of a bigger company, as you have to trust other producers, do you guys have like a way that you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is, there's obviously a baseline of any project of what needs to happen, right? Like, let's say it's a scripted film. Like, we know we're going to have to cast actors. We know we're going to need a buttoned up script, or whatever. We know we're going to need a schedule and a breakdown. Like, there's all the physical elements you need. And so I think as you become an experienced producer, you become more and more familiar with what those elements are that at a baseline are what you need. And then you kind of build on that from there. And I think an important thing is being flexible, I would say too, because you may have like the perfect plan. It's going to go exactly like this, but then it doesn't and things fall through. And so you have to be like, I think when it comes to problem solving, you have to be able to pivot really quickly. And you might have like this perfect idea of this is how this problem is going to get solved. And then the whole thing goes sideways and now you've got a new problem. And so if you don't like problems, this is not a career to get into because it is, I'd say, a very large portion of what we do as producers is problem solve, because you're dealing with a moving thing. You're dealing with a living, breathing thing here that you can't fully control every aspect of, even if you want to. So yeah, I think for me personally, I'm just someone like, one of my strengths is thinking of things other people aren't thinking of. And that's just like a strength of mine. I think I get it from my dad. He was a consultant and analyst in the computer technology space. And he was always kind of like analyzing things and critiquing things and figuring things out. And that's a very big strength for me. So I like to kind of look at everything that's happening and think, wait, what about this? Or we might be forgetting that. But as I'm getting older, my memory is starting to fade. So I think having checklists, having things that you, based on your experience that you have to refer to, are a big part of it too. Like, something I do is I keep a note open, and anytime I learn something that I want to make sure I remember for next time, I write it down, because I want to make sure that like, oh, this thing happened. It's very easy to quickly solve something, move on, never think about it again. But I think you want to remember, what was that thing I had to solve and how did I solve it? Because the next time it comes up, you'll know exactly what to do. And so I think, a lot of what I do now is based on my years of experience in the industry at this point, having seen a lot of different things, experienced a lot of different things, that has helped me prevent a lot of issues from happening or be aware of a lot of things that could happen, but also given me kind of a bit of an ability to, as new things come about, know how to approach it. But, no one, like I said before, no one has the answer to every question. No one has the answer to every situation. So I think it's also just like trusting yourself to know that you're going to figure it out, and having those people around you that you do trust. Like, you need to have a solid team. Like, I've got a great team here at Campfire, and we have solved so many different problems together. And there's a level of trust of like, we know that like, if something happens, like, we're going to figure it out together. And so I think, you also have to have the ability to kind of put your head together with other people and figure out how to have the best solve. And sometimes your solve is not the right one, and you've got to be like, okay, let's pivot to this one. And you've got to be able to let other people in. You can't be trying to be right all the time. It's a collaborative job.
I feel like you have such like vast experience with the different types of producing and production across multiple types of subset industries. We talked about music videos, commercials, long form TV, feature film. I've been wanting to have this conversation with somebody, and nobody's quite fit yet in terms of like, that has walked the walk through all of them. Maybe conceptually they understand. Can you help break down like maybe like some of the like similarities or differences, maybe more differences around like what it means to be a music video producer versus like maybe a long form producer or commercial producer? Do you have like just things that come to your mind as like either skill sets, know-how, or just like
Sure.
the process is slightly different, right?
Yeah, the process is different. I would say how you're spending the money is different. You know, as a producer, one of the jobs you have of many is also to manage the budget and the schedule overall, right? Like if you're line producing, that's really on you. If you're, you know, creative producing above a line producer, you need to work with that person. You know, wherever you are in the chain of producing, there's management of the funds going on, right? And so that is such a tricky thing because, you know, when we're trying to make this creative endeavor, you know, we have to utilize those resources we have, and things are always going to change, you know, and at the end of the day, our job as producers is to uphold the best version of the creative we can, right? And there obviously are limitations to what can be done with the money you have and the time you have. But our job as producers is to figure out we try to say yes and, like, yes, it's a great idea and maybe we can do it this way, right? Because you can't always do everything the exact way we want to do it. So I think that's a big part of it in terms of, you know, the resources you have, figuring out the best way to do it. So you've got the best creative possible, but you're working within your constraints and being realistic with what you can do. And those are at odds sometimes, right? And you have to figure that out. So I would say when you're doing a short form project, it's more manageable. Like, let's say you're doing a 2-day shoot. If you're doing a 2-day shoot, you are going to be able to visualize and map out like exactly what you're going to be spending on those 2 days at a certain point in the process. You know, maybe you're a week out and you're like, okay, we know we've got this crew, these locations, like this is what this is all going to be. And your variables are just going to be less than a long form project, right? So with a long form project, you're having to sustain the money that you have over a much longer period of time. So in a 2-day shoot, you're going to be able to really figure out, okay, here's how we're going to spend the money. Here's how we're going to make the best version of this thing. And we're going to go do it. And we're going to get in the can and we're done. If you're doing a year-long project, let's say, if you spend too much on like the early part of it, you are now going to affect the later part, right? Because you've got this one shoebox of money. So I think how you conceptually are thinking of managing your resources is going to be different on the different types of projects. Like something short, you're going to be able to see it easier. Something long, you're going to make those tough decisions. I did 2 seasons of a show called Special. The poster's behind me here. And, you know, we shot for the second season was, I think, 40 shoot days. And, you know, you can't really plan for all 40 shoot days up front. You can get through as much of it as you can. But if you've got, let's say, 4 weeks of prep or 6 weeks of prep, you know, you kind of have to go on a rolling basis. So, you know, part of what you're doing on a scripted project that has a lot of shoot days is you are mapping out everything as much as you can, but really your focus needs to also be on those first few shoot weeks. Because once you're in those first few shoot weeks, you can continue prepping the rest of it, right? So that's a different way of looking at it too. It's like with a music video or a commercial, you're going to prep the whole thing, you're going to do the whole thing, you're going to get done in a matter of weeks. Something like a long form project or a scripted project, you're going to have, you know, a much longer timeline to get through. So how you're attacking it, what you're figuring out, how you're doing it is going to be a little bit different. And with a documentary, it's even more different than the other two, because a documentary, you go in with an idea, you have maybe an outline, you know who the key characters are going to be or who you think they're going to be. You might always find more as you get into it. You know where your baseline locations might be. You could be on your second to last shoot day and suddenly a new character emerges and you need to figure out how you're going to cover more cost of shooting more, because now there's like this new character or this new storyline, or, you know, something changes. Let's say it's an active case and something changes in the court case or the situation, and now we need to keep going. So I think when you're given the budget for a documentary, you're going to go in with your best intentions, and then you're going to have things that change, right? I don't think I've worked on a single project that turned out like exactly as it was planned, because there's going to be things that happen. You might also need more time creatively. Like maybe we're in the edit and we're just not quite getting it, and we want the story to be the best it can be. So we need to put some more resources into editing further. Or maybe there's an amazing song that like later in the process, you didn't think there was going to be a music cue you had to license, but like now this is so pivotal to the story, we've got to get it in. So I think you're looking at your resources a bit differently. It's all similar in concept, but I think in practice it's different, you know, and in documentary, you're going to have a very different crew size than you're going to have in scripted. And then you're going to have a different crew size again in commercials and music videos. And that, it is all kind of different there. I think the other thing is with commercials and music videos, you do have a very finite amount of time. So you also have to make sure you get it right. There is no like extra day, or if you're doing an 8-week scripted show, like maybe we didn't get something right on the second week, but we've got all these other weeks to figure out how to redo it. Right. Yeah. You don't get that on a 2-day shoot or a 1-day shoot, especially a 1-day shoot. It's like, that's all you've got. Right. So I'd also say that it's, different ways of preparing different, obviously you want everything to be done perfectly as much as it can, but you have different abilities to plan for things, make up for things, figure things out when you've got a longer project than in a shorter project. On the flip side to being able to plan it perfectly, you also have to like get it right because you don't have those additional resources or that additional time. So if that makes sense, I think it's kind of like there's different ways of like thinking about it, how you're planning it, how you're budgeting it. And we do staff it differently too. It's different types of crew. People that do documentaries, people that come from like scripted or commercials may have a harder time doing a documentary depending on the role and experience. Like you might be a camera, a DP that is used to having a certain size team under you. And then on a documentary, maybe we can only send one person and they've got to pull focus, download their cards, carry all their stuff, charge, and that might happen because it's like a tiny little verite thing, or it's a bigger shoot. I've worked with so many different artists in the space. And so every approach is different. So I think for me, I'm always trying to make sure that the people I'm hiring are right for the job. But I'm also trying to make sure that we are giving the person we've hired the right resources to succeed, right? So if someone's like, I only can work this way, then you don't want to hire them and say, sorry, you can't work that way. Because like that's how they want to do it, right? So I think it's also important when you're bringing people together, if they don't have the exact experience you're looking for, find out what their approach is going to be. Is this going to work with our resources? Making sure that you're putting the best teams together. Because there's so many ways to do the same thing. And it doesn't mean that one is like more right than the other necessarily, but there are different ways to doing things. So I think as a producer, it's also thinking about that too, is like, what way is going to be the best way to do something for the product at hand.
I don't know if you've seen that article recently that came out about how 71% of film budgets go over budget. It's crazy to think that this has become like a standard in the industry and you just kind of have to keep going with it. I don't know if you've heard of Saturation, but Saturation is the next gen budgeting tool that you can use to streamline all of your operations and your budgets and your finances on a project. It gives you really easy collaborative tools and you're able to bring in your budgets and your actuals and your expenses all in one place. If you haven't tried it yet, go to saturation.io, sign up for a free account. It's really easy and quick to sign up. Yeah, such a great way of laying it out. It actually kind of is a great segue to what I really want to start to press into is what your role is at Campfire Studios. Is you're the CEO and you're also obviously producing and EPing mainly high quality doc. It sounds like, and obviously there's scripted projects as well. What you guys are doing is amazing. And I kind of want to maybe pull the curtain back a little bit around what does it look like producing a doc at that level? You kind of started to touch on little things like how, with scripted, obviously you have a script, you follow a schedule. The Bible is there. It's all kind of, you just have to follow this thing and then it hopefully kind of just reaches the end, right? Editing, all of that kind of just follows the same kind of guidelines that are there. With a doc, obviously, like you're saying, anything can change. It's like idea to then finished project, but everything in the middle is like this, not necessarily a straight linear line. Can you walk us through the project or through a project, how you guys maybe think about that? And the thing that I'm because I've done some docs as well, and the thing that I know about docs is that because of sometimes that ability for it to be shaped by new information or things that might be happening, you're tempted to almost recut the doc or re-edit it with this new information or make it better and better and better, and there's a never-ending kind of cycle that can kind of happen with that. At the level that you guys do it, it's not like passion project documentaries. it's like there's an engine that Campfire has to be able to successfully produce documentaries, award-winning documentaries even, and then also make sure that it's working with the platforms that hire you or maybe are funding it. Can you like tell us how the sausage is made at that level? Like, what does it look like to like produce a Netflix documentary or a Hulu documentary? Like, is it any different than maybe what people would think of like a person in their bedroom with a camera, like running around making a documentary?
I think in terms of the process, typically there's going to be a development period where we're going to figure out what is this story, who are the characters, what kind of access do we have to archive? Because obviously, you need visuals to tell a great documentary story. There needs to be a visual element. So what is the style going to be like? What is the content going to be? What do we have access to? Who do we have access to? So a lot of times we're doing pre-interviews, we're meeting people, we're sending people out on the ground to get people on board to be interviewed, have people sign appearance releases so we know that they're on board to get to be on camera, finding locations. So I think that in today's space, there's a lot more pre-production that's going on to make sure that something is a viable story and that it's going to work for a longer format. So a lot of that work is being done in the development period to explore the story and make sure that we know what the story is. And then there's outlining. So we're going to outline the story and figure out what that act structure might look like. Of course, it may change when it gets into the edit.
But does that, like what you're talking about, the development period, the outlining period, the kind of testing the waters, is that pre kind of network funding or?
It can be. So there's different ways that this happens in today's market. So sometimes a network wants to provide some development funding to pay for a development package on a project, giving them the option to create it, to greenlight it, and giving them the exclusive option to do that. Sometimes it's a story that we just want to explore, and so we'll go out and do it with our own resources. Sometimes someone comes to us with a great idea and we help them explore it and flesh it out. We have an amazing development team here. I think they're doing an amazing job just exploring these stories, breaking them down and figuring out what the pieces are and what we have available. So, typically before a network greenlights something, they want to know what this is going to be like. And there can be a deck that's created. There could be outlines. There could be a sizzle. It really depends on what the network's looking for and how far we need to go to make people feel like they've got enough of an understanding of what this story is going to be. But typically we're going in with fleshed out creative materials and understanding of what we're going to be able to make. And so that would typically be pre-green light. And then once we have a green light, and in that process, we're also budgeting, we're scheduling, right? So as chief operating officer, I'm overseeing all the physical aspects. With my team, we've got a whole production team, post team, archive team. We've got legal, finance. We're working together on okay, what's the schedule going to look like? What's the budget going to look like? How are we going to make this happen within the resources we have? What kind of crew are we going to need? What kind of resources are we going to need? And our creative team weighs in heavily on that as well. And then, somewhere along the line, we'll bring a filmmaker in and we'll tailor our approach and our plan to that filmmaker's idea and their approach, what they're thinking. We try to put our heads together on what is the best way to tell this story and what resources do we need to put it behind it to do it. And then it's, crewing up from there and figuring out, who our editor is going to be, what creative producers. We typically bring on a creative producer to work alongside the director, or we might bring on a showrunner, depending on what the team looks like. And so we'll have a day-to-day producer on the product. We'll have a line producer who's overseeing the budget and schedule and hiring, working closely with our in-house team. Having a strong team is obviously really important to be able to do multiple projects at the same time. And then our in-house team here, we oversee everything pretty closely. We're both in the trenches and outside the trenches at the same time. So we're really lock in step with our teams. And we're really hands-on producers, which I really pride myself on. I think we all do here. We are doing the work too. We are in it. We are in it together. We're making it happen. And I think that collaborative spirit is really appreciated by the filmmakers we work with as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so curious, like, how do you guys approach budgeting a documentary? Like we were saying, it's very different than a scripted, and you don't really maybe know the full, like you're budgeting an idea or an outline more than you are a script. How do you guys approach that?
So one of the key things that I like to reference in a time like this is assumptions. So we make an assumptions document, and that assumptions document is going to say as much as we can map out for ahead of time in terms of what locations are we like. We kind of map it out based on the creative, right? So we're going to meet with our creative team, whether that's our in-house creative team and or the filmmaker. We're going to say, all right, we've got characters in these locations. Sometimes we'll actually make a Google map and we'll just like put all the different people down, look at where they are, and we'll say, okay, we could take a trip to this area and get these people. We could take a trip to this area and get these people. Figuring out like how many interviews do we think we need to shoot to tell this story? This is always a tough one. And creatives sometimes, don't like when we're like trying to ask for like how many shoot days, because it's a hard question to answer, right? Like how do you know how many shoot days you need? So I think some of these things are dictated by the budget, right? So sometimes it's like, okay, we look at the budget once we put in post and the staff and, archival licensing and music and things that we know we're going to need at a baseline. Like, can we squeeze a few more shoot days? Can we, so we try to come up with a plan based on what the creative is, based on what we know of it at that time. Like I said, you have to, as a producer, be ready to pivot. But I think going in, it's like, okay, we know we're going to need to interview these 15 people. We think we could do 2 at a time, maybe, or maybe some are going to be on their own. Maybe it's a trip over here. Maybe some people can be flown into this location and we can just get all those people here. Obviously, it's very expensive and time consuming to travel your crew to each individual person. But there may be a character that like you need to go to their house. You've got to go there, walk through their stuff with them. And then maybe there's another location where you can fly some people in. So we're trying to figure out how to honor the creative, but also work within the confines of what's efficient with the budget. And I think confines is not a good word, but, work within the parameters of what we have available. So it's a bit of an art there and a bit of a dance. And it's very collaborative with the team of like what makes the most sense. So we try to go into a project as much as we can aligned and saying, okay, we're all in agreement that we're going to have this many shoot days, this kind of crew, we're going to maybe license some music. Maybe we're not planning to license any music because we want to put that money into something else. Again, it depends on the creative, right? Like, what do you need for the creative? Some things like you just know you need that, like, especially if something's in a certain time period, like you're going to need that music probably to establish that time period. So there's different things that creatively you need to make sure you have. So we kind of lay that all out into like our ideal world, right? Like what would be the ideal way we would do this? Then we budget it. And then there's the process of, okay, the ideal is putting us over. This is too much. We've got to cut some stuff. Then it's like, okay, what do we do? And again, our job as producers is to work with creatives and figure out solutions, right? So maybe that's cutting some schedule out, but we have to figure out, we can't just cut things back. We have a story to tell. So we have to figure out how do we, move things? How do we tweak things? A lot of times it could be schedule based. Like maybe like the length of the schedule we have is too long, because if you've got your whole staff working every week has a certain cost to it. I think once you're in the edit, I would say for anyone making a documentary, don't start your edit until you're ready. Because once you start your edit, assuming you have a weekly editor that's working every week, like there is a cost to that with your team, your assistant editor, your equipment. It is disruptive to like shut that down. People may have to take other jobs if you need to take a pause. As much as you can, wait to start that edit till you have enough material, enough archive gathered, enough interviews shot, the better off you'll be budget and schedule wise of like, okay, we're going in. So we try to make sure we're starting the edit at the right juncture. And then, but you might need to shrink that schedule. You might need to bring on 2 editors, maybe maybe there's a tough deadline and you actually need to bring on more support, but in a shorter period of time. So there's all sorts of tricks and things of like how to move things around and manipulate things to match the creative and the budget. But that is sort of the process. And if you have a network involved, they're going to review your budget. They're going to review your schedule. They're going to have questions. They're going to want to feel good about the plan too. They're just kind of helping you as well in navigating, what their priorities might be, what their creative team is most concerned about, or, areas that they might feel, need more resources or maybe have too many resources. So that can be a very collaborative process as well. There is an art to getting things to the right place.
No, so good. Also, it's really fun to see a Ross say pivot so many times.
Because friends, yeah, I know.
That's a really great kind of framework around like budgeting, especially with the assumptions doc. It's really cool to hear how you guys approach something like that. I'm sure it does, but like, how often are the assumptions like, or how often are you guys on budget versus there are budget overruns, and like, how do you deal with stuff like that?
I think it really depends. Like, it really depends on the project. I think if there are budget runs, it's a collaborative discussion. Like, should we make this decision? I don't think it's typical that would happen unknown. I think it's more like, okay, this is happening. Like, do we need to like discuss the importance of shooting more than we expected because of this pivot in the story? Is that an opportunity that makes sense to explore? Typically it's a collaborative discussion of like what we need. Sometimes things just go over because you can't predict, right? Like, let's say your interview subject is no longer available and you're going to have to wait months until they're willing to sit down again. Or let's say, I don't know, a natural disaster happens and
the world shuts down.
World shuts down. There's lots of, well, that's a whole different podcast. But I think more to just to say that like things can happen with your story that are out of your control. Yeah. And so the question there would be, do we stop where we are, or do we need to continue? And if we need to continue, what does that cost look like? And is that something we need to explore to have the best creative possible? And are the financial partners willing to do that? Or do we need to say, there are times that happens where people say, you know what, this is worth additional funding to expand this story. There are times that, there is no additional funding. We can't explore it. We need to, or like we want to explore it, but there is no additional funding. What can you do to figure it out? And so I think, again, being very malleable there, always having a solution. Sometimes there are ways to get additional funding for something. If it's necessary and people are on board for it. I'd say most times there are not, because anyone who's financing something has committed an amount of money and they may not be expecting to commit anymore. And so most likely they're not, because they're investing a certain amount to say, this is what I want to do. And so you as a producer need to figure out, how do you still do it? How do you still do the thing that has changed, that has gone over schedule, that is whatever, and make it happen on the same budget you have? And so there's a lot of that work that has to be done to say, maybe we need to rethink how we are doing this, or, maybe we need to take something in-house, or, have a smaller team, or, there's many different ways to figure out how to solve a problem here with a budget.
I can't imagine that somebody could produce documentaries and have control issues, because it seems like there's just so much that, like you're saying, like, I can't imagine, raising a couple $1 million. I can't imagine, because I've done it, but like raising a couple $1 million and then maybe like, the main subject doesn't want to do it anymore, or something happened and they get arrested, or maybe it intensifies it. But that pivot, especially when so much could be out of your control, seems like that's the art of documentary, is like you're trying to like go with whatever the punches are, and hopefully it supports and enhances the story. But I can't imagine that like it's for the weak to go through a process.
It's definitely not for the weak. But I do think it's part of the creative, right? Like, if things change with your story, it's part of what you're doing. And I think, it would be different in scripted. Like, if a cast member suddenly dropped out, like that could ruin your entire project. Sure. With documentary, it might be part of the story. Like, you have to sort of do your best to get your subjects on board and make sure that people feel that trust and respect and understanding of how you're going to tell their story. It's so important to have a good relationship with your subjects.
What does the average doc for you guys look like in terms of like timeline? Like, does it like have...
a feature film, I would say about a year, sometimes less. Yeah. Maybe 9 months to a year, probably a year. But depending on, the situation, it could be a little bit less, a little bit more. I'd say a series, it depends on how many episodes, but probably somewhere between a year and a year and a half. Sometimes things take longer. Obviously there are the outliers. There's the features that go on for 2 or 3 years, depending on the story.
Sure.
Like sometimes the story just keeps going,
Yeah.
or maybe there's a creative change, or maybe the creative needs to keep being developed. But I'd say like if everything goes perfectly, probably a year for a feature and maybe a year to a year and a half for a series, depending on how many episodes.
With that, you talk about like call it feature doc versus feature series, or sorry, a doc series. How does that get decided on what the container is? I know some part is creative, but do you go in thinking it's a series, or do you go in thinking it's a feature doc and changes? How does that work?
It's really going to be based on the creative and budget. Sometimes there is only the budget to do a feature, but a series might not be much more depending on how you're doing it and the duration of the episodes. But I think usually it's about the creative more than anything. So, there's creative that is going to sustain a 3-episode arc. There's creative that is going to be better as a single feature with 3-act structure. So I think that's really something that the development team or the filmmaker, is going to have a really strong POV on. The network will have a strong POV as well. But something that has a lot of elements to it, that has a clear arc over multiple episodes, would be stronger as a series. I think it also depends on the network and what their audience is looking for. Like there are certain types of genres and creative where the network is going to have the research to say, our audience is going to like this better as a multi-part project, or our audience is going to prefer this as a feature.
How does it work with network? Are you a work for hire to the network, or are you pitching ideas to the network? Like, how does that relationship look like when you are like talking about network documentaries?
So it happens in a few different ways. Sometimes a network might bring us a story that they want us to explore and develop, because they know that we are good at that, and we have a proven track record of getting into stories and breaking them down and figuring them out, and developing them. So sometimes it's a network bringing us something that they've been exploring, or maybe they got pitched by someone else. Other times it's a product that our development team or our team here, our CEO, could be any number of ways that these projects have come in, and then we decide to develop them. And the work for hire, it just depends. Typically, if you're doing a project for a network and they are financing it, then it's going to be work for hire where they'll have ownership. If you're independently financing something, then it depends on your agreement with your financier, whether you have ownership or not. They might retain full ownership as work for hire. There may be a shared ownership. It may be owned by your SPE, the entity that you set up, and then the rights licensed and distributed from there.
Yeah, and when you guys decide not to go network, it sounds like you do self-fund or maybe privately like get docs funded.
We don't finance, but we do work with independent financiers. It may be something that is going to be super splashy that would do really well as a sale, being distributed later. It might be something that I think there's typically a strategy there to whether it's something that'll do well in a sale and be profitable that way, or if it's something that's going to make more sense just to finance directly. Obviously getting something financed directly by a network is fantastic because you have the guarantee, the hopeful guarantee of distribution, and you know what your budget is going to be, what your deal is going to be, what your fee is going to be. I think as running a business, like it's much more stable to do network funded projects.
Yes.
Independent projects are typically going to be lower budget, and typically lower fees, lower deals for everybody, and then but they'll be back end, and so if it sells, there's a chance to make a good margin that way. But as many independent films do not get distributed. The festivals, show a ton of movies, and only some are going to get good distribution deals. And so there is always that risk when you go the independent route of whether it will do well or not. And it, changes based on the market. So I think for us, it's going to be primarily a business decision of what's going to be the best likely outcome for our project. But we certainly love when we are able to do great festival premieres. And but there's a benefit to both ways of doing it.
Is that still the path, even for a company like yours, where if it is self produced or independently financed, that the traditional way of going through festivals is still like the best route for a sale?
It can be, yeah. I mean, there's also, sometimes we'll work on something, we'll put a press release out, and there might be interests and competitive offers based on a network seeing what we're doing and wanting to get into it ahead of time. So I think networks will sometimes, buyers will sometimes want to do a deal before something is finished. Once they hear about it, oftentimes it'll be through a festival premiere, setting up buyer screenings, pitching to all the buyers once we finish something. But yeah, there is still a market there for distribution after something is made.
I always think of producing as one part, a lot of what we're talking about, which is like finance, budgeting, the money. Then there's another part of it that's almost like legal when it comes to like docs, right? Like there's IP, there's copyright, there's people involved or whatever. Like how does that work with doc? Because I can't imagine that it's the same as scripted.
No, it's definitely very different. Yeah, I mean, legal is a huge part of documentary filmmaking. And that's a big part of producing as well. It's understanding that, navigating that, having a great attorney to represent you and to vet your project. Being able to tell documentary stories, being able to tell real stories, we do have to rely on, really understanding the law when it comes to, things that are in the public domain, or understanding the fair use doctrine and how that, how that plays into what you're making. So yes, legal is definitely a big part of it, and it's something that you need to sort of learn as you go to understand how it works. But I would say make sure you have a great attorney working with you if you're doing a documentary.
Yeah.
Especially on the fair use side, defamation, personal rights, privacy. Having someone that can work with you to review that, make sure that the way you're telling the story, is sound.
Would you say that that's probably like the biggest advice that you would have for somebody that's like starting out, wanting to like pursue a documentary idea or something like that? Is there things that they should be aware of, like when it comes to like maybe misconceptions or like around like what it means to like do a documentary on somebody's life or something that's out in the public domain? Like how what would you give somebody not legal advice, obviously, but like just advice of starting out?
There's a great book that I recommend for anyone who's producing in documentaries or wanting to learn more about the process. On the legal side, it's called Clearance and Copyright. And it's by Michael Donaldson, I think Lisa Califf as well. And it's really good. So I definitely recommend that. It explains, clearance and copyright and fair use. And it does go into protections for documentaries and how journalists are able to tell real stories. But yeah, it's definitely important to understand that and make sure you're aware of those aspects of storytelling.
Yeah, no, it's really good.
And ideally it's not, ideally you're utilizing legal protections to help you tell your story, right? And it can affect how you tell your story, but it's also doing it in a legal way. And, we also are looking at journalistic integrity, of course, and like, are we, we want to make sure we're doing everything in the most ethical way. So I think there can be questions that come up in that side of it too.
So the one thing I did want to ask you about is there's a lot of kind of talk about like the state of the industry, what's happening in LA, what's even happening in the US, and it affects different subset industries a little bit differently. Obviously, it's going to hurt maybe features differently than it does commercials and shorts and things like that. What are you seeing in terms of like for your company and for yourself? Like, are you guys not as busy as you used to be? Is it busier? Is work there, or are streamers like buying anymore? Can you kind of clarify like state of industry?
I think there's a lot of similar talk going around about this topic, and it's obviously a tricky one. But I think ultimately, things are normalizing from when the boom was, right? There was a huge content boom, and around all the new streaming platforms, around the demand for content to fill libraries, and I think that is coming back to like a more normalization space. So it's kind of coming back down from where this big boom was, and I think things are definitely still happening. We're very fortunate to be busy. But things are harder to get off the ground. Because there isn't as big of a demand for content, it isn't as fast to get something going, right? And I think buyers want to see a more complete package ready. They want to know that what they're getting into is a sure thing, because the dollars they have to spend are reduced as well. So I think it's just more important than ever to have really strong pitches, to really, especially in the documentary space, really know what access you have, what rights you have, what material you have. Coming to a buyer with something more solidified and in place to show like this thing can get off the ground and do well and succeed. There's not as much appetite for risk as I think there might have been in the past. But things are definitely happening, and there's great stuff being made. So we're certainly trying to remain optimistic and positive about it.
So great. But last question on this topic: does the AI kind of scare or boom or excitement do anything for this space, or at least in docs? Like, is it exciting or is it scary? Like, have you guys been using it?
Yeah, I think it's new. I think we're all trying to wrap our heads around it. I went to the Produced By conference with Producers Guild, and a lot of that day was spent on talking about AI and what that means. It was interesting to see content creators who were like changing the whole way they do things around AI. I thought a filmmaker came up and I thought had an interesting view of kind of like looking at this as another creative tool for storytelling versus looking at it as taking jobs away. It's like, the way visual effects impacted the practical effects industry, with a similar sort of comparison of like, this is an evolution of technology, but how can we use it to tell great stories? I think for me, I'm trying to figure out, how can I make things more efficient and stronger using some of these AI tools for organization, for, task management, all sorts of different things are available now. And I feel like I'm kind of tiptoeing into that still to figure out like what can I find that's going to help make things better? Maybe we can improve some workflows, improve some processes, and have it affect us all positively. So I'm trying to look at it more from like, how can we utilize AI to build upon what we're doing versus like displacing things? But there's certainly a desire to explore, what AI looks like in the generative context, right? And I think that is something we're going to be seeing more of, because as these budgets come down, it is harder to figure out creative ways to tell stories. I also think, just from a storytelling perspective, there are some things that you really can't create or tell in a good visual way if there isn't archive, or if there isn't the right material that you need to tell your story. So I think it could be, I think it will be an interesting and important way that we see storytelling evolve, of being able to create visuals that you wouldn't have been able to otherwise create.
Right.
So it's something that I think we're definitely still exploring and wrapping our heads around, but I do think that there's a lot of good that can come from it. There's obviously the risk of displacing jobs, which is a real risk and a fear that a lot of us have. But I think more than anything, there is a reality that it could also help us. And I think it is already, even just in the limited AI tools that I use day to day, it is helping us a lot, whether that's note taking in meetings or, task management, research. I think there's a lot that we're already able to use on those sides of it in the non-generative space. That's just enhancing our jobs and helping us be more effective. So I'm kind of leaning in that way, but I feel like I've got a lot to learn.
It's so smart, because I think, to your point, like as generative becomes more mainstream and whatever kind of lane that takes on, it's going to be more important for producers like us to make sure that we are more efficient, that we're competing on the efficiency side of things. And it might look like AI in supplemental ways in like workflow tools, like you're saying, whether it's budgeting or scheduling or, you know, whatever it might be. And it's more important now than ever to like really adapt to technology, maybe even on the workflow side, just as much as it is maybe on the generative side. So it's a really good point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, there's multiple parts to it. And I think, you know, I think it is going to become normal to utilize these tools. And so I think embracing it is important to keep up with what other people are in other industries and whatnot are going to be moving towards, right? Like we're seeing it in our emails, we're seeing it in our calendars, we're seeing it everywhere we go. It's on our iPhones now. Like there's AI being integrated into everything we do. And some of it can just be really beneficial to helping us take on more or helping us manage the workload of what we do as producers.
That's so true.
You know, for me, it's important, like, to keep it ethical, right? Like, I think if you're exploring generative AI, there are ethical ways to do that. You know, I think it's interesting that you can work with software that is training, like you can have a software that trains the model to create generative content and it is training off of material that is licensed, right? So rather than combing the internet, which would not be okay, you know, you could license material, you could, you know, pay an actor for their likeness to be using it in your project. So there are ways to do it that are more, you know, what I would think of are above board than others. So I think it's really important to figure out, you know, and focus on making sure that you're doing things in a way that you feel is fair and right, you know, because I think there's a lot of layers to what can be done there. But I'm seeing, you know, I'm definitely seeing those opportunities coming up, and it was talked about at the Produce By conference in terms of, you know, being able to license your material to train a model to make something, right? So I think there's also like opportunities that exist within there too.
Well, I'm so grateful, Ross. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us here in the audience. Can you like tell us what you're up to now? Plug any projects or anything that you want to promote?
We have a new film that I'm really excited about. It's called Unknown Number: The High School Catfish, and it comes out August 29th. And it's a really powerful story about a girl in high school who was harassed via text messages from an unknown number, and it kind of affected her and her friends and her relationships and her family. And it delves into the circumstances around that, what happened, and who was behind it. And it's really well done. Really proud of it. Incredible filmmaker Sky Borgman, and we were really grateful to have you know, incredible participants supporting and telling the story. So I'm excited for the world to see it. Amazing,
Ross. Such a pleasure. I can't wait for part 2, and really appreciate you joining the pod.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks for tuning in to Produced With. You can find more episodes wherever you listen to podcasts. Produced With is brought to you by Saturation. If you're a filmmaker, check out saturation.io, the all-in-one production budgeting, payments, and actualization tool. If you like this episode, subscribe to the show, leave us a review, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. Special thanks to our producer Eugene Wade and editor Stephen Gray for helping shape the conversation and making it sound as good as it does. And hey, check out the show notes. Join the community and find us online.